Once upon a time, in a quiet corner of the world where the sky blushed with lavender and the hills hummed with wind, there was a small village named Willowmere. In that village lived a kind-hearted woman named Eliza Bennet. She had soft gray eyes and a gentle smile that made everyone feel like they belonged. Eliza lived alone in a cozy stone cottage at the edge of the forest, where trees whispered ancient stories and time seemed to slow down. Each evening, Eliza would light a single candle in her window, a signal to travelers that they could find warmth and shelter there. Her home smelled of lavender and cinnamon, and the fire crackled like laughter from old friends. Her days were filled with caring for her herb garden, feeding the sparrows who waited patiently at her windowsill, and writing letters she never sent, just for the joy of putting her thoughts on paper. One particularly crisp autumn evening, just as the wind began to sing its sleepy lullaby through the trees, Eliza spotted a stranger outside her window. He was tall and cloaked in green wool, his boots dusted with leaves. His name was Nathaniel Blake, a quiet traveler with tired eyes and a notebook full of stories he collected on his long walks through the countryside. Eliza opened her door and welcomed him inside, without hesitation. He smiled shyly, thanked her, and warmed his hands by the fire. That night, over tea and warm bread, they exchanged stories. Eliza told him about the time she followed a butterfly so far into the woods she found a hidden lake that mirrored the stars. Nathaniel told her about an inn he once stayed at where the cat knew how to open doors and the soup always tasted like childhood memories. As the fire dwindled and the stars took their places, Nathaniel admitted he had trouble sleeping. Eliza, with her usual kindness, pulled an old book from her shelf and began to read softly. Her voice flowed like a gentle stream, carrying him into a dream before he even noticed his eyes had closed. The next morning, Nathaniel thanked her and promised to return one day. Eliza nodded, her smile serene, and waved him off as the golden light of dawn kissed the horizon. Weeks passed, and winter came with its hush and frost. Snow blanketed the village and turned Willowmere into a painting. Eliza, wrapped in her wool shawl, took longer walks in the woods now, her lantern casting golden halos on the snow. One morning, she found a letter tucked beneath a rock near the hidden lake. It was from Nathaniel. He had returned to his travels, but had left her a story he'd written just for her. The story was about a tree that remembered every word ever spoken beneath its branches. It whispered poems to the wind and secrets to the stars. Eliza read it aloud by her fireplace that night and felt something warm and ancient stir in her heart. That winter, more travelers began arriving at her door. Word had spread of the woman with the calm voice and the candle in her window. There was a woman named Clara who had forgotten how to dream, and a man named George who had been silent since his wife passed away. Each one came seeking rest, and each one left lighter, as if Eliza's stories brushed the dust off their hearts. The stories she shared weren't grand or filled with danger. They were quiet tales about talking teapots, shy dragons who painted clouds, and a fox who taught a child how to listen to the wind. These were the stories that nestled into the listeners' minds like warm blankets, wrapping them in safety and wonder. One spring evening, Eliza received a letter stamped in wax with a seal shaped like a star. It was from Nathaniel again. He had found a village in the mountains where the stones hummed with music and the air smelled of honey. He had shared her stories there, and the people began lighting candles in their windows too, hoping that someone like Eliza might one day walk through their doors. Years passed gently, like feathers floating on time. Eliza grew older, her hair now silver like moonlight, but her eyes were still soft and full of dreams. She no longer walked as far, but the candle still burned in her window each night. One summer evening, when fireflies danced like fairy lights in the garden, a little girl arrived at her door. Her name was Lily, and she held a worn notebook in her hand. It was filled with stories, some about stars that played music and trees that gave advice. She had heard of Eliza from her grandmother, who once stayed at the cottage long ago. Eliza invited Lily in, served warm apple cider, and asked if she'd like to read her stories aloud. Lily nodded shyly and opened her book. Her voice trembled at first, But Eliza listened with such deep care that the girl grew braver with each word. When the last page turned, Eliza reached over and gently placed her hand on Lily's. "Your stories are beautiful," she whispered. From that night on, Lily visited often, always with new tales. Sometimes they wrote together, sometimes they sat in silence, letting the fire speak for them. And slowly, Lily began to understand the magic Eliza had always carried. It wasn't just the stories themselves, but the way they made people feel seen, safe, and understood. As seasons changed, so did the cottage. Lily helped tend the garden and dust the shelves. She learned how to dry herbs, soothe restless travelers, and light the candle in the window just before dusk. And Eliza, now content and peacefully tired, began to rest more often, knowing that the stories would continue. One evening, when the wind carried the scent of jasmine and rain, Eliza sat by the fire with Lily. She looked at the girl with warmth in her eyes and said, "Stories are like lullabies for the soul. When the world feels too loud, we just need a quiet tale to remind us who we are." That night, Eliza fell asleep in her chair, the fire crackling softly, and never woke up again. Lily cried, of course, but her tears were gentle, like summer rain. She lit the candle in the window that evening, and every evening after, just like Eliza had. And she read stories to those who came seeking rest, travelers, wanderers, the lost and the lonely. One day, a familiar figure arrived, a man with silver in his beard and a notebook tucked under his arm. It was Nathaniel. He had returned, this time not to be soothed, but to say thank you. They sat by the fire, sharing stories and memories, and Lily read him the last tale Eliza had written. It was about a feather that floated through time, touching lives quietly and reminding people to breathe. Nathaniel stayed for several days, walking through the forest and listening to the wind. When he finally left, he placed a small stone by the hidden lake with Eliza's name carved into it. Just below it, he wrote, "She taught us how to rest." Years later, Willowmere became known not just as a village, but as a sanctuary. Travelers from distant lands came not for adventure, but for peace. They followed the glow of the candle in the window, the scent of herbs in the breeze, and the stories whispered beneath the trees. And Lily, now grown, kept the fire warm, the kettle full, and the stories flowing, soft as starlight, calm as rain, steady as the heartbeat of the earth. She told tales of kindness and wonder, of trees that sang and skies that listened. And when people left, they did so carrying something quiet but powerful, a story just for them. The candle still flickers each night in the window of that cottage in Willowmere. And if you ever find yourself wandering under sleepy stars, needing a place to rest your weary thoughts, follow the